Good afternoon. If you're watching us from the US, we talk to you, Dr. Fabian and I, Iman Al Yusuf, sort of from the campus of WKU in a virtual way. And good evening if you are watching us in from Dubai, UAE, or the rest of the world. We are here to talk tonight or today about Halloween in a very, very new and a very different perspective, different angle, most probably a little more towards storytelling and cultural aspects. So it's a pre-session of Halloween, but before, let me introduce my guest today. And Dr. Fabio, I wanted to hear a lot from your side, but I I gotta do this. I gotta read your biography. I fell in love with it once I read it, so I'm gonna read it out loud.
Sure.
And on the WKU, the Western Kentucky University website, you are talking to us and saying, I grew up on small cotton farm in rural West Texas. After high school, I set off to become a high school English teacher, earning my bachelor's English from Angelo State University. Life would take me to Northern California, where I earned my master's degree in rhetoric and composition from CSU Chico. In 2004, I made a new home in Bowling Green and have been teaching general education courses at WKU since spring 2007. Throughout my teaching career, I've been focused upon understanding the role of language in the creation and transformation of realities. I find it my duty to help students participate in these investigations, believing that rhetorical analysis will be the most helpful skill they acquire.
Yep.
This is amazing. I'm really glad I'm having you on this Zoom session today with us, Dr. Fabian.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the invitation. And I look forward to learning as much from you as you hope to learn from me. So yeah.
Great. I can see there is a line here. We're talking about learning, we're talking about language, and today we gather to talk about really different aspects of Halloween. Now, I posted the ad for the session, the pre-Halloween session, and I said that we'll talk about the Day of Dead and we'll talk about the resemblance, if there is any, with Hag al-Layla, or what is called Gargian. I'll be presenting the Arabic aspect of it, and you'll be representing the Hispanic or Mexican aspect of the Day of Dead. And I have a lot of comments of people really interested, and some comments of people saying, no way, there can be any relationship between both of them. So it got me
Oh,
really
I'm
excited.
anxious. I'm anxious for that conversation.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah.
So, please, if you would like to go first, what is the Day of Dead for the people who are watching us or listening to us who has no idea about it, first of
Okay.
all?
Well, I'm going to just give a brief overview, but I hope
Yes.
that our conversation, so that I don't get too long-winded now, we can come back to how sort of cultural appropriations and how things from one culture to another end up morphing into a holiday for a different group of people. But in short, Day of the Dead is really a few days actually. It's technically on November the 2nd, but it actually begins on midnight, October 31st. So the very beginning of November 1st through the end of November 2nd. So it's really Days of the Dead, but it's only on November 2nd, what they call Day of the Dead. In brief, it's a celebration of those who have died, in remembrance of them. The basic idea is that you create what's called an ofrenda, which would be an altar, kind of like a monument in your home or at a cemetery of the place of the person who died. And we can talk a little bit about like what goes on to that, but that's the gist of it. It's not a mourning. We don't mourn on that day. We celebrate and we are happy. Yeah.
Uh, Dr. Fabian, where can you see this more? Because I heard that, for example, it's celebrated all over Hispanic and Latin American countries, but mostly it is seen more in Mexico. So where can you actually see it more celebrated?
Well,
Good.
that's true. I honestly, when I grew up, I didn't celebrate it, and here's
Okay.
why. Here's why. This was a very sort of a rural type of celebration, like way out in the country, And it wasn't until the 1980s that it kind of started moving into larger cities. And so by that time, it hadn't really reached. So my family, even though we're from Mexico, they're from northern Mexico and were already in the United States. And my parents had been in the United States since the 1920s. And so by the 1980s came around, it really hadn't even gotten to sort of, my parents hadn't had access to it. So I want to make sure that you understand that. But it's primarily celebrated in Mexico. It's become a big celebration in Mexico City now. But you'll find it mostly celebrated in these rural areas in Mexico is where you mostly see this celebrated.
Okay, so I want to go along with you, like hand in hand. We're walking through this because, again, we want to see how it's mirrored between those two different celebrations, maybe, and maybe they're so similar at the same time. You were saying that the Day of Dead is actually the Days of Dead because it's celebrated within, let's say, maybe 3 days, right? 3 to 4
Well,
days?
48 hours. It doesn't really begin on Halloween. It begins like at midnight, like
Okay.
November 1st. So beginning of November 1st. And then it
Here,
ends at the end of November 2nd.
Here we can sort of find a resemblance because in حق الليلة or Gergean, because it has a different names and different people, because people celebrated mostly in the Middle East. We're talking about the Gulf area region of the Arab world. So if we're talking about the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and Oman and a little bit northern side, because we're talking about also Iraq and the area of Ahwaz. So in that area, these are different countries who celebrate these days, and they have different namings for them. And I will talk about what does that actually it means and why do they have these different names. But the most important thing is that we have two different days in which we celebrate. The most known day for that is, because we're talking about the Arab months here. So the Arabic month of Sha'ban, which can be related, if you want to start from the Arabic lunar year, it will be the month number 8. So it's the 8th month, and it's the day of 15. So at the middle of the 8th month of the year, it's called Sha'ban. And most of people celebrate Gergean or Hagg al-Layla in that day. Other people also celebrated again a month later, on the 15th of the 9th month of the lunar Arabic year, which is Ramadan. It's the month of fasting. So people celebrated in the middle of the month of fasting or 2 weeks before the month of fasting. So we have it also 48 hours, 2 days, but they're separated within a whole month. Yes.
Yeah, so they're similar in those.
In a way.
Maybe we can talk about why they're celebrated that way. We might find some differences, but yeah.
I'm so fascinated with the idea of celebrating the Day of Dead. What is actually being done? How is that, go through with the rituals of the celebrations? Yeah, please.
Sure, absolutely. So as I mentioned, it was a more rural Mexican type of celebration.
Mm-hmm.
And so it begins on November 1st, at the very beginning of November 1st. And
Okay.
so let me put a pause here and kind of give you the general, again, a little more narrow, but still general. A general idea is that in these 2 days, the bridge between the living and the dead, it disappears. I mean, it's there now. Now there's a bridge, and the dead can come and visit. And so because they come and visit, this maybe gives you this thought that they come and visit is what happens in that celebration. So families will create what's called an altar or an ofrenda. And if your viewers wanted to, I'll put it in the chat here. It's called an ofrenda. And if people wanted to look that up, and they could find images of what people do, and different communities, just like maybe in Christian households, Christmas is celebrated differently in every household, right? They do different things, but the spirit of it is still the same. So the idea here is that people will create an ofrenda or an altar, and there are some basic characteristics. There's some food, there's some drink, there are some flowers, and sundry other things. But the idea is that when the dead come to visit, you are offering in an ofrenda and in this altar things that they may have liked when they were living. So the idea is to give them some food and drink to continue their journey in the afterlife, right? And so for the kids, you know, the first day, November 1st, is called Dia de los Inocentes or Dia de los Niños, which basically translate on November 1st, it's when the children come back. And so those ofrendas on that day, there are candies and sweets and things that the kids may have liked. Um, and then on the next day, which is when the adults would come, then it becomes alcoholic beverages and, you know, those kinds of things. But it's a celebration of them and remembrance of them as they travel in the afterlife. So
So in that area, in the area of food or beverages, is where the difference gets between each and every household? Is there like a specific common foods or drinks or flowers that everyone celebrates?
well, yes and no. Yes and no. Because just like anybody says, no, that's not how it works. No, that's not how it works. So there's always this debate about what's the real way to do it, as you can imagine, right? Like anybody makes a dish, you know, well, my mother made it this way. Well, no, that's not how you do it. And so
Yes.
think about that as we travel down this road here. There are traditionally, marigolds, which are a flower in Mexico traditionally. So if you look at those ofrendas, you'll find these very bright, kind of like the color of that pumpkin back behind you there, or the flowers that you have behind you. So
Yes.
that's generally the color of the flowers. And there's
Okay.
always something called, or usually something called pan de muertos, which is bread of the dead. And so it's a bread that has bones on it. And again, it's food, right? And for the children, again, beverages, and for the adults, adult beverages. Now,
Okay.
depending on where the person came from or whatever, they will debate with you about what's the correct alcoholic beverage. Traditionally, what as my family has kind of taken on this tradition in more recent years, we put out the beverages that our family members liked, not what we like, but what our family members liked. Um,
Okay.
so that's probably where you will see a lot of variation. One other thing that you will see, and I have it back here, um, is what happens. And I actually, by the way, hang on, give me just a second. I've got some down here. Hang on.
Oh, that's amazing. I was so curious looking at the background. Of course, the books caught
Yes.
my attention first, but then the skulls. So, yeah.
All right. So this right here is a sugar skull. Okay.
Wow.
It is made
Uh-huh.
out of sugar, but it's hard as a rock. And
Okay.
so, in preparation for Day of the Dead, now I'm an advisor for a student organization here on Western's campus, and these are from last year, and they're still hard as a rock. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, and so traditionally on Day of the Dead, now we don't do the back part of the skull because it's just more time consuming. But
Okay.
what we do here on campus is we pre-COVID, we would make these and then allow students to come by and decorate them. And
Uh-huh.
so on Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, this is something that a family would make. They would make a sugar skull and they
Mhm.
would decorate it. And I'll show you some that are not made out of sugar, but they are decorated. And they would put like the family members' names on the face, but they would be very, very colorful. But this is actually made out of sugar. And
Uh-huh.
the way it's made is there's some sugar and some water and something called meringue powder, which is the powder that's used when people make cakes to make the frosting very hard and stiff. And so that's what
Okay.
makes it hard. But let me show you. Let me grab. And so I have a face mask that my sister made for COVID, and I'm going to put it on so you can kind of see the sugar skulls. So I'm going to show if you can see them. So
Wow, they look amazing.
so
Uh-huh.
this is an example of that. So
And
this
they
is what
can go creative, right? Whatever colors they want,
absolutely
decorations.
absolutely. Now
Wow.
you don't want to eat these because they've been handled by people, but uh,
That was my upcoming question. So what happens? What okay. Yes.
so
Uh,
this is a giant plaster skull. It's not real, so don't think that I have somebody's real skull here.
a
But
lot
this
of
is
sugar.
a plaster. I got it at a craft store, and it was already painted, and you can kind of see what kind of painting. And people you might see if you look online, people will paint their faces like this, right?
Yes.
So there's an example of one, and then I have two small ones that are kind of more ornamental.
Okay.
These two up here. And I have a couple more that my daughter made, a bobblehead right here, and then a
That look
friend of
amazing.
mine. So here's one,
Oh wow.
and
Okay.
here is another. Again, these are ornaments, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And so if you, again, if your viewers would go online and look up Day of the Dead and face paintings, they would see people would paint their faces like this.
And we
So
go
that's,
be creative, I guess. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, to be colorful and creative in that, because it's a celebration, right? And it's always if you look at the skulls, they're all smiling. They're never frowning. It's not a day of mourning. It's a day of celebration. So again, if you look at the skull, it's not frowning. The other one is not frowning. So, but those are some of the basic things that happen. So.
Does it include, regarding those 48 hours, does it include kids or teenagers or even adults going from house to house, knocking doors and asking for candy, like a trick or treating?
Yeah.
Is that
Not on Dia de los Muertos. That's Halloween. Halloween
okay?
that happens, right? But
Yeah.
not on Dia de los Muertos. I did
Okay.
forget to tell you that on those altars, often you will see pictures of the loved ones as well, and candles, things like that. So, but again, it varies. But no, I mean there's not a lot of door to door beyond people that sometimes I have been and seen places where kind of like a competition where people will decorate and will put their altars. They put their altars in front of their doors or their windows, and people can come by and admire them, right?
What? Okay.
But they don't
Um,
necessarily go around trick or treating or getting that. So
the reason I'm asking is, here we are trying to find ways that are similar, that brings those cultures together, and ways that we can celebrate the difference. Because I mean, we talked about that earlier. I I do like lectures and workshops after I studied cultural diplomacy in Berlin, Germany, and about 3 4 years ago in 2017. And since then, it has always fascinated me how cultures are different, and then at the same time they are very similar, and whether we can celebrate and share those similarities, we can also celebrate the differences. And in what is called Hag al or Girgi'an. Now, Hag al literally means for tonight. Hag is for, and al-Layla in Arabic is tonight. And Hag al is the same celebration, as very similar as Girgi'an, the same dates, the same rituals, but the naming is different as of what country you are addressing or you are talking about. And people in the UAE, in the United Arab Emirates, in Dubai, for example, address it as Hag al. And other countries such as Kuwait or Saudi Arabia or Oman or Bahrain, they call it different names, Girga'un or Girgi'an. And Girgi'an, I looked up the meaning of it, and they said that it roots back to the sound of the drum. It's
oh,
like clicking either the drums because of the celebration, or clicking of those clay sort of plates or baggages that the kids would put the candies in.
ah,
And
okay.
because they will be sort of like Halloween, door to door. No, the kids and the teenagers would knock on doors of the neighborhoods, and they would ask the families to give them candies and sometimes like nuts. And they would put those things in those clay plates or handles, and they would knock. So, sort of. And
It's
there's
like
also,
American trick or treating then.
yes, yes. I mean,
Halloween.
if yeah, there is a very good, let's say, connection between Halloween and then between Hag al or Girgi'a when it comes to, neighbor visiting and knocking the doors and asking for trick-or-treating or candy.
Yeah.
While we're talking about the scarier part, like ghosts and, I don't know, zombies, maybe there is a remote relationship between the Day of Dead and Halloween. So it's sort
Yeah.
of in between both of them.
Yes, yes, I agree. And as I was preparing for this, like one thing that I was reminded of, and this is, um, there's probably more similarity between Halloween and Day of the Dead than there is between our our celebrations, right? What I've learned is that the reason why Day of the Dead and Halloween exist is it came from a pagan celebration, a
Hmm.
Celtic celebration over 2,000 years ago, and they celebrated the beginning of the new year on November 1st. And they would have bonfires, and they would celebrate celebrate that. They believed, like in Day of the Dead, that between the October 31st and the 1st, that separation of the living and the dead, and so they would dress up again so that they would not be confused. Well, the Catholic Church, and this is how Day of the Dead came, and this is maybe why it's celebrated in Mexico the way it is. And again, if you were to read the histories, you'd get some conflicting things, and no, this is the way it is, but I'm trying to give a general idea here. So Halloween really stands for All Hallows Eve, right? All Hallows Eve, which means the day before a holy day.
Okay.
So around
Yes.
the 9th century, a Christian, a pope, moved the celebration of All Saints' Day, which was occurring later in the year, to coincide with this pagan holiday, right? As often we find holidays where, and the truth is that a lot of the Christian faith, the holidays are a way to capitalize on a pagan holiday to kind of get, hey, come over here, we'll celebrate about the same time. There's a lot to discuss there, but that's essentially what happened. And so you have All Saints' Day is on November 1st. That's a Catholic holiday. And then All Souls' Day is November 2nd. Again, something that Catholics celebrate. And so there is this, again, the conversations about what Halloween is and how people dress up and the idea of the dead coming back and all that. So a lot of people in American culture don't even realize why they dress up as monsters and ghouls, and don't realize how it's tied into this 2,000-year-old celebration of the afterlife coming to visit. And we have to put on these costumes so they don't think they don't come get us, right? We're one of you, we're going to be we're a ghost as well. So, yeah.
This is really interesting when it comes to costumes regarding the Days of Dead. Now, you talked about, face painting and all those amazing, creative, innovative skulls, but do people get dressed and differently? What is specific costumes that they would wear on the Days of Dead?
Like any holiday, it grows as it becomes more popular, correct? And so what probably began as a simple, with the rural communities, the access to color and paint and stuff, people would just paint their faces, right? As a just a plain skull, maybe with white and black and that. Then as they started realizing they could get paints and paint their faces like this and do that, it grew and grew and grew, until now they have parades where people will dress up like an entire skeleton, right, in a parade. But generally speaking, most people will just paint their faces, right, in a very basic way. But some people will dress like this, right? This is kind of going over the top here, right? This is
Yes.
called La Catrina, and this is her beau. This is her man here.
Wow.
But people will go all out, and you can see there are flowers. Here, let me show you real quick. So often on the face paintings, you'll see marigolds and flowers. So here you see the flowers on her hat, and you see the flowers on her dress. And so they may make costumes.
Yes, it's very happy.
Like an altar of sorts, right? So they will do those kinds of things in their attire. But for the most part, there's not like a costume, so to speak. Like Halloween, people would dress up like a monster or Spider-Man or whatever. So it's kind of changed. So, but they don't dress up, do you? You don't dress up in a costume, is there? When you go.
I wanted to share a picture and a video also. So
absolutely.
Yes, regarding the costumes. Now, in Girgian or Hag AlLaila, because it's sort of a little bit religiously connected, because it sort of is related to the month of fasting. So some people say that it's just 2 weeks before the month of fasting celebrated to encourage and motivate the kids and to celebrate the idea that we are gonna all fast and get the family all together, usually before now, the whole neighborhood, the whole village or town all together. So, and they would just distribute all sort of candies and drinks, like fruit drinks and nuts. And I think the video has that too. Regarding the costumes, they usually, until now, they go back to dress traditionally. So there are like very traditional costumes, especially, again, we're talking about Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf countries and the UAE. So there's one very sweet head wear that they would, and a cloak or attire that little girls wear, and it's called al-bukhnik. And I will share a picture before the video.
Okay.
Just a second. So,
Ah,
yeah. So usually it's very colorful, and the girls would wear that dress or attire or a cloak that is had embroidery on it, and then on the head they would wear the bukhnik, the head and neck, and usually it's made of silk, all kind of colors, and then it has this embroidery and work with the lines of the threads of like, golden or silver threads.
right.
So
You say this, and as I'm thinking, um, in Mexico especially, people
mhm.
when they do paint their faces, they will wear more traditional um, costumes, so to speak, in the parades and in public when they do that. But at home they don't. But yeah, there is, I guess, something there.
Yes, I will share the. Okay, I'm gonna share the video. Usually, the videos of حق الليلة or Gargian is made by companies or organizations as ads. Now, in the last say 10 years, so these are is either songs and or ads, but it has the whole. It shows the whole concept and costumes and what happens in Gargian or حق الليلة. I believe this video I'm gonna show you is from Kuwait. It's much similar to the UAE though. So let me try. Okay. Did you get to see the little bit of the video clip? No?
No, I got to see your profile picture, which is amazing, by the way. But that's all we saw. We only
I know.
saw.
I've been trying to share the screen itself, but I don't know. It's not.
Well, this is technology. It happens sometimes, right? While you're
Okay.
doing that, I'm going to put this back on the. Oh, there it is. I see it. I see something.
Okay. What do you see?
I see it says share device audio on. Okay. Now
Okay.
there. Okay, there we go. Now hit play. And I
Okay.
think.
But you see a YouTube video, right?
يبا نمر بيت ورا بيت نبي الحلو ونبي الحلو والجكليت ونمر بيت ورا بيت نبي الحلو والبرميت وذا ما عندكم نقول شو تقولون يا علا عامر البيت نرجع ونلقى جكليت وبقرن نقرنقعو وقرن نقرنقعو
Awesome. Can I guess
Okay.
what it was about?
Yep.
So it seems like these guys are telling them about the celebration. I saw they had these giant candies and they were walking around with candies and they were
Yes.
shaking their finger about maybe be a good kid, telling you to be good. I don't know. And then if
You know,
you're good, you'll get candy. I don't know. I'm just guessing. Is that kind of how it works?
the funny part is now the part with the sort of threatening or what happens actually in Gargian or حق الليلة is that those kids, the young girls and boys, when they look roam around and they walk around the neighborhood knocking door and door to door neighborhoods and asking for candy, they are like sort of traditional songs they would usually say. And most of these, they would ask the people of that house is that in sort of what it kind of means that if you are so generous as to give us a lot of candy, the more candy you give, the more prayers and blessings we will ask for you. that you
Ah,
will be in good health, and God will give you more prosperity and joy for you and for your kids. And sometimes they would ask God to grant them not only health and joy, but the ability to travel to Mecca for religious visit there.
right.
So yes, so actually, it's
That
sort of
is kind of like Day of the Dead. It's kind of Dia de los Muertos.
yes, yeah, a lot. And did you see the flowers and the
I
colors?
did. I did. That reminded me a lot of Dia de los
Yeah.
Muertos. Just very vibrant, very like, really bright purples and yellows, and just sort of celebratory. It wasn't a mourning. It was a celebration. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I feel like I don't know if this is the same case with the Day of Dead, but in the Girgian or Hagalila, the power sort of is just shifting to those kids or teenagers, because now they have to pray for you, for the whole entire household or the family. And if you don't give them a lot of candy or satisfy them with candy and nuts, then they won't pray for you for
Aha.
pilgrimage or for prosperity. So it is sort of oriented around more about kids and
Right.
for those kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is like the first day of Day of the Dead, right? Centered around children.
Mm,
Uh, you instead of giving candy to children to ask them to pray for us in
yes.
Dia de los Muertos, so the first day, Dia de los Inocentes,
Mhm.
we are offering candy to help them in the afterlife where they already are there, right? So it's a
Yes.
little bit of one of them is we're not there yet, and the other one is you're there, let me help you out. So yeah.
This is fascinating. I mean, if we can just shift, okay, we talked about, the roots of the celebrations, how are the rituals being done, and how this celebration is sort of similar, and how is it different? So whether we're talking about Hagilela or the Halloween, how did you see everything, that is changing nowadays, if you get to compare how this is handled and celebrated now and let's say 20 or 30 or 50 years ago?
Well, like I said, it didn't really get it's a very rural celebration, and it didn't get in Mexico, and it didn't get to the cities until the 1980s. So that's 40 years ago, right? Oh my goodness.
About,
It feels like
yeah.
it was just the other day, but anyway, it was 40 years ago. Um, and it's there were some very popular movies that, like, we have Coco, the movie Coco,
Mhm.
and then you have the Book of Life, which kind of weave in these ideas of Day of the Dead and stuff, and it's become more commercialized. And so, I will see people walking around with, shirts that have this on there, and I'm like, do they really know what that means? They say, oh, it looks cool, I'm going to wear it because it's Halloween, without really understanding it. So it's become much more commercialized, as
Okay.
often holidays, as you've illustrated. Now it's becoming, they have commercials to celebrate it and all that, versus it being something that was more private, I guess. So it's become more public in many ways. So
Yeah. It's the same thing in Arab world. It's becoming more commercialized. A lot of organizations and companies and individuals, even, they're using this for ads, which is sort of, I mean, in cultural diplomacy, there isn't, we don't say that as a bad or good, positive or negative angle. It's all facilitated for the good of the culture itself. When you have the culture as part of what you digest from TV or magazines, whatever you say, the thing is, you only have to maybe look a little bit more around, maybe research more, as you were saying. The question is, do they know where this comes from and what does this exactly means? And most of important nowadays, the world is more globalized, and especially after Corona now, we're talking about, we talk to people, we get in touch with people via social media, virtually, online, and these cultures are merging together, and we are just, we found that these are more, we can find more similarities than differences in
I
those
was
cultures.
just about to say the exact same thing, that we are more alike than we are different. And
Yeah.
I think I think often we sort our lives, and
Mhm.
it's easier to go through life to distinguish what makes me different from you, versus um, Sorry, my alarm. My daughter has an alarm that tells me that she loves me every day at 1:36. So it goes off
Oh,
on my phone. So sorry, she does love me, and I love her very much too. So, but yeah, I mean, we do. I think as a regardless of where we are or what culture we are, we seem to focus much more on what makes us different than what makes us similar because I
yeah.
think the differences are scary to us, and so that's what we're afraid of, what we don't understand sometimes. And I hope that learning to understand other cultures and other celebrations and other people makes us less afraid of them and makes us more open-minded and be able to bridge some what we might think are unbridgeable differences, right? To get along in a more prosperous and peaceful world. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can attribute a lot of my life growth, pardon me, with getting to know people who were not like me.
Yeah, I think this is the most strong element or tool, whether we're talking about soft power or cultural diplomacy or even anything that would reflect or affect the individuals. Being able to realize that we share a lot in common, and being able to appreciate the differences and look them up, research those differences and where do they come from. Culture is fascinating, at least maybe to a lot of people who
Us.
share this as us. Yes, exactly. It's very fascinating. It's amazing. And there is, again, I'm really glad that I got a lot of comments saying that absolutely not on social media. There is nothing in common between whether we're talking about Halloween or the Day of Dead or Hag Layla. And I can see here it's a lot that is in common. And whether we have this line in between, there's a lot of interesting stories that we can share yet. Yeah,
Yeah,
it really is.
absolutely.
Yes. Um, I gotta ask this. Do you have an idea how COVID or 2020 is reflecting the celebrations, whether it's for Halloween or that Day of Dead? Now that we're approaching those days, I'm not sure how
Yeah.
this gets
Well,
here.
I mean, unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because this is how I feel about COVID, right? Because some people are like, my kids are not going trick or treating this year. They are not
Yes.
going to go out door to door and get candy just because for precautionary measures, right? I know that there
Yes.
are still many families that are participating, and so for some people, it's not going to be very different. Now, what might be different is the method in which they give out the candy, like people are giving pre-packaged candy or not letting the kids reach in there, things like safety measures.
Yes.
But I don't think like Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, because it's always been a more private celebration that happens in the home.
Yeah.
The things that might affect that would be one's ability to go and get the supplies to do that, right? So can I
Yes.
go and buy some flowers? Can I go and buy the meringue powder? Can I, do those things? Can I go buy the stuff to decorate? Do I find all these things? That might be the only thing that keeps people from going out and purchasing or acquiring the things that might go on the altar. Um,
Okay.
but because it's such in my mind at least, the way I celebrate it and the way I understand it is, even though it's become a much more public sort of celebration, the intimacy of it is because they come to visit you. The idea is that your loved ones come to visit you, not to visit the public. And
Yes.
so they come to your home. And so in those regards, it doesn't really change that much.
Well, what happened actually for the last Hag Layla or Girgi'an, last Sha'ban and Ramadan, it was exactly at the same time with everything that is being
Oh, that's
quarantined.
right. That's
It was
right.
within the months of April and May. So back then, the world did not actually, have the understanding that we have right now of what is going on. Everyone was really freaking out and scared. All borders were closed. Everything was almost all full-time whole lockdown. So yes, I maybe this made it closer to the Day of Death because people did that more intimately. So
Mm,
they did these celebrations all together, families at homes by themselves, they actually excluded the part where the kids would go and trick or treat, or knock doors to doors for candy. So they did these celebrations. They purchased candies and they celebrated within the same family, within the home itself. So maybe what happened with COVID or 2020 just brought those two celebrations even closer together, if we want
Perhaps.
to.
Yeah, I
Yes.
mean, I know that my family is getting together with maybe one other family that we are close with, that we kind of have our little bubble, maybe a few people, but it's not going to be a very public sort of thing. We might go and buy some bags of candy and say, "Here, kids, here's your candy," so that they don't have to go door to door. Um, but but yeah, it certainly has changed. I mean, everything has changed, of course, right? Um,
Yeah.
but yeah.
I'm really glad we're having this chat, and this would be one of the best sessions that I ever done. It's so much fun. It's a lot of stories and
Hey,
culture,
you're
and
just saying that because I'm here, and you probably the next person you'll be like, "This is the best session." You can always say that, right? Because it will always be better than the one before, and that's okay too.
I
That's
can't
okay.
do that. Sort of. It will be on my YouTube. No, no, no.
I would
That's
go
too
on there and put the thumbs down. I'm going to get my whole family, everybody, thumbs down because it was not the best. This one was the best, and so
exactly. It wins by far. And now we are almost pre-Halloween Eve, so I guess we will be in touch with a lot of the celebrations, whether it's virtual celebrations. I don't know if anything's going to happen on campus, but congrats.
are you going to carve a pumpkin? Are you going to carve one?
I don't know. I've carved pumpkins last year and
Uh-huh.
the year before with my siblings back home in Dubai. So I'm not sure if I'm gonna do. I already purchased my pumpkin at
Yeah,
the
I
back.
see.
I got two pumpkins. Yeah, one is like smaller and white one, and one is like more bigger and orange.
Those are harder to carve, though.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I don't want you to lose your fingers. Don't cut your fingers off. Just paint them.
I,
Just paint them this year.
I may paint them and use
Yeah,
some. Now that I'm just inspired by the Day of Dead, I may do that. Yes, yes. With some marigold colors, flowers, and everything that is,
yeah. And
glitter. Yeah.
you have to share a picture of that with me.
I will. I will.
Yeah,
Yes. That'll be
absolutely.
fascinating. Okay.
Um,
I will do
so
that.
yeah, my family, I think today I'm gonna get my family. We haven't gotten our pumpkins yet.
Okay.
So we're gonna go buy our pumpkins. We're gonna carve pumpkins. I'm gonna try to find some candy.
Okay.
Um, and then we're gonna start putting our altar together tonight. So
Wow. Well, I would love to, if you can share pictures also with me, that'd be really nice.
absolutely, absolutely. Our altar is not as big and as extravagant as the ones you will see, but it's going to be a little bit smaller this year because we have 4 kittens in our house, and we don't want them eating all the food and knocking everything over, burning
Yes.
the house down with the candles, those kinds of things. So it may be a little bit smaller this year in
Uh-huh.
terms of that, but yeah.
Yes.
And by the
And
way, I have some of these. And
okay.
I will let you have one next time I see you. We will coordinate, and
Oh,
I will get you one of these that you can. And my understanding is that this will keep for as long as you don't get it wet. As long as if it gets wet, it will dissolve, right? Because it's made of sugar. But uh, my
that is
daughter
perfect.
has one. Yeah, my daughter has one that's 2 years old, and it's still in her room. So
Wow. Oh, I'd love that. And I'll just go into the net and look for some ideas, where I can go creative with paint and colors and glitter. Maybe I can
absolutely,
stick stickers or something on it. I'm getting all kinds of ideas now.
sounds
um,
great.
it is. It is. Thank you so much.
Well, thank
And
you.
thank you for this amazing journey, cultural journey. I felt like I traveled in time and geographically. And hopefully after this Corona thing ends, we will get to share more celebrations, maybe in the upcoming future, whether it's Halloween or Day of the Dead or
We can talk
Hagele.
about Christmas too,
Yes, yeah, that would be really fun.
or
Exactly.
Thanksgiving. We have Thanksgiving here, which nobody else has.
Yes, yeah, that's a unique thing. Maybe in Thanksgiving, it's easier to find differences. I guess today we've had a lot that is in common,
Right.
more than what we find in
Absolutely.
Thanksgiving. Yes.
Absolutely.
So I'm really glad to have you today. And I enjoyed myself a lot. I'm sure
Yes.
everyone hear that and watch us later on will enjoy as well.
Well,
Thank you
thank
so
you to all your viewers, and I appreciate your taking time to however long you had to watch whatever we had to share, and that hopefully you'll look this up, and
much.
you will also make an
Yes.
effort to find some commonality in culture and in language and religion, and see that we all do have much more in common than we have different. So
Yes, we do. I like genuinely believe in that. And as much as I research, the deeper I go and research and read, it gets really accurate that yes, as a theory or whatever I have like as a mindset or a believing, yeah, you can easily find that out there. So yes, that's 100% sure.
all right.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much. Thank you.